On the afternoon of May 11th, 1996, a DC-9 carrying 110 people came down into the Everglades northwest of Miami at roughly 500 miles an hour. It left a crater 100 feet across. When Miami-Dade police divers waded in, they found no wreckage at the point of impact and no body part larger than a knee. The recovery took a month. In the end, only about 20% of the human remains aboard that airplane were ever recovered at all. Partial remains of 70 of the 110 victims were eventually identified. The rest are still there. That is what a Florida swamp does. It does not simply kill, it absorbs. And that is the thing people get wrong about the state. The swamp is scenery here, the airboat tour, the boardwalk with the handrail, the postcard Cypress at sunset. It is the backdrop to a vacation. But there are places in Florida where the ground is not ground, where the water has no bottom you can find, where a person can step off a trail and become, within minutes, genuinely and permanently gone. Today we are counting down 9 of them. Not the prettiest swamps, not the biggest names, the ones with a documented history of taking people and not giving them back. They are ranked by exactly that, by how completely each one keeps what it takes. By the time we reach number 1, you will understand why the largest search in the country has failed inside these places, and why some of what has gone into them is never coming out. Number 9. Cypress Creek Preserve. We start close to the city because the swamp does not wait for the wilderness. Cypress Creek Preserve sits in Pasco County in the sprawl north of Tampa, minutes from subdivisions and strip malls and the interstate. It is the kind of place people walk on a Saturday afternoon in sneakers. The obvious question is what could possibly go wrong on a suburban trail? The answer is that a Florida swamp does not care how close it is to a parking lot. 2 days before Christmas in 2023, 2 hikers went into Cypress Creek and could not get out. What followed was not a casual search. The sheriff's office launched its aviation unit, and deputies used night vision goggles from a helicopter to guide officers through alligator habitat in the dark to reach them. They were found. That is the good ending, and it took a helicopter and night vision to produce it, within sight of the suburbs. That is the pattern in miniature. Flat ground with no landmarks, water that all looks the same, a canopy that closes over you, and a sun that goes down faster than you expect. The people who work these preserves know that proximity is not safety. Number 9 earns its place because it takes almost nothing back. But it is the proof that the swallowing does not require the deep wilderness. It only requires a wrong turn. Number 8. Picayune Strand. Now to the swamp that swallowed something larger than a person. Picayune Strand, east of Naples, is where one of the biggest land frauds in American history came to die. The obvious question is how a swamp swallows a city. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Gulf American Land Corporation set out to convert roughly 114,000 swampy acres, an area 8 times the size of Manhattan, into the largest subdivision in the world. They blasted canals into the limestone, piled the spoil into hundreds of miles of roads, flew buyers over the land in the dry season, and sold it hard. 17,000 people bought lots. Many never stood on their own land. Almost no homes were ever built because in the wet season the whole thing goes under. The company went bankrupt in 1978, and the swamp simply took the grid back. What it left is stranger than ruins. For decades, this was a lattice of empty asphalt roads running through cypress and pine to nothing at all, one of them described plainly as a road to nowhere, 2 dirt tracks passable only in the dry season, and then just barely. In the restoration that followed, crews removed some 260 miles of those roads. People got lost in that grid for years, because every identical intersection promises a destination that does not exist. Number 8 goes to the swamp that ate a city off the map, and left a maze behind that swallows people who trust the map. Number 7, the Pinhook Swamp in Florida's Okefenokee Edge. Now the entry with the most literal claim on this entire list. Most of the Okefenokee lies in Georgia. That is worth saying plainly, but the swamp crosses the state line into Florida, linked to the Osceola National Forest by the Pinhook Swamp, a corridor of the same Blackwater country. The obvious question is why this swamp is different from the others. The answer is in its name. The indigenous name, rendered by colonizers as Okefenokee, is usually translated as Land of the Trembling Earth, and it is not poetry. This is a peat swamp, a basin filled over 6,500 years with a deep, floating mat of decayed vegetation. Methane rising from below lifts the peat into islands. Trees grow on them. Grass grows on them. They look exactly like solid ground. And in the words of the naturalists who describe the habitat, some of the mats will support the weight of a person and some will not. Sit with that. A landscape where the ground itself is a lie, where a surface can hold one person and open under the next, where you learn which is which by stepping. Trees rooted in peat can be made to bob in the water like a buoy. There is no reading it from the outside. Number 7 belongs to the swamp that does not need to trap you or hide you, because the earth itself is the thing that gives way. Number 6, Tate's Hell State Forest. 200,000 acres in the Panhandle between the Apalachicola and the Ochlockonee carry a name that is itself a warning. The state of Florida owns it. The state's own agency publishes the story of how it got that name. The legend goes like this. In 1875, a farmer named C.B. Tate walked into the swamp with a shotgun and his hunting dogs, chasing a panther that had been killing his livestock. His dogs ran off. He lost the gun. He was lost for 7 days and nights, drank the swamp water, and was bitten by a snake. He finally staggered out near Carabel, roughly 25 miles from home, and lived just long enough to tell 2 passing men, "My name is C.B. Tate, and I just came from hell." Then, he died at their feet. Here, honesty matters more than drama. Local historical research documents a real C.B. Tate through homestead records, son of Jebediah, 160 acres granted for $5. But no contemporary newspaper or official record confirms the ordeal itself. The story is oral tradition, and it should be labeled as such. What is not folklore is the terrain, a titty-thicket swamp so disorienting that during 40 years of private ownership, over 800 miles of roads and ditches were cut across it, and it is still a place where the state's own advice amounts to don't get lost. Number 6 goes to the swamp that a whole state agreed to name after what it did to one man. Number 5, the Green Swamp. Now the one almost no one outside Florida has heard of, which is remarkable because it is roughly 870,000 acres sitting in the middle of the state between Tampa and Orlando. The obvious question is how something that size stays invisible. The answer is that Florida looks past it. The Green Swamp is not one swamp, but a system. Wetlands, pine flatwoods, cypress domes, hardwood hammocks, and it is the hydrological heart of the peninsula, the headwaters of the Withlacoochee, the Hillsborough, the Peace, and the Ocklawaha, the sponge that recharges the aquifer millions of Floridians drink from. And it has a quiet reputation among the people who live at its edges, a hunter who does not come back, a truck left on a dirt road, a search that ends with more questions than answers. The searching is the problem. The canopy is dense enough to defeat aerial search. A helicopter can pass directly over a person and see green. So the operations follow a grim sequence that anyone in wilderness rescue will recognize. Rescue becomes recovery, and recovery is eventually suspended. Sometimes it works. In 2024, a Florida Fish and Wildlife K9 found a missing hunter alive in the Green Swamp, and that dog was rightly called a hero, which tells you exactly how the alternative usually reads. Number 5 belongs to the swamp in the center of the state that Florida drives around without ever looking into. Number 4, Big Cypress National Preserve, 729,000 acres northwest of Everglades National Park. and the moment you step off the road, you are in a different category of place. The obvious question is why a federal preserve with a visitor center should frighten anyone. The answer is what the trail actually is. The Florida National Scenic Trail runs north out of the Oasis Visitor Center directly into the swamp, and hikers do not walk it so much as slog it through knee-deep water for miles. There is no tread underfoot. The road is marked by orange blazes painted on tree trunks, and between the blazes you are stepping blind on cypress knees and slick limestone you cannot see through tannin black water. Distances lie. A mile takes what 3 miles should, and the landscape is designed to erase your bearings. Dwarf cypress and sawgrass and dome after dome that look identical in every direction. In country flat enough that there is no high ground anywhere to climb for a look. Miss the next blaze and the trail is simply gone, and so are you, in a preserve the size of a small state. Number 4 goes to the swamp where the trail itself is underwater, and the only thing between you and vanishing is a painted mark on a tree. Number 3, Fakahatchee Strand. 85,000 acres southeast of Naples, the largest strand swamp in the world and the largest state park in Florida. It is also the place where the professionals admit openly how easily this goes wrong. The obvious question is what makes this swamp worse than its neighbors? The answer is the disorientation, and you can measure it by how carefully the experts treat it. A veteran outdoor writer wading in alone carries an old-fashioned magnetic compass for a simple stated reason. Folks get lost here. The nonprofit that runs guided walks hands visitors a waiver before setting off. Those guided walks are offered only from November through April. Anything earlier, the guides say, is too dangerous. Because the summer brings higher water, submerged hazards you cannot see to avoid, more active snakes, and alligator nesting season. The park's own biologists spent 3 decades wading it, sometimes waist deep in murky water in the middle of gator mating season, to reach orchids that grow nowhere else. That is what the Fakahatchee is. A place so dense with life that the life itself is what disorients you. Endless repetition of cypress, pond apple, royal palm, ferns in every direction, with no landmark and no horizon. People still go in anyway off the trail alone, chasing a flower worth a few $100s. Number 3 belongs to the swamp whose own experts will not enter it casually and who tell you so before they let you follow. Number 2, the Carlton Reserve, and now the swamp that beat the FBI. In September 2021, during the most closely watched missing person story in America, a 23-year-old man walked into the Carlton Reserve near Northport, 25,000 acres of Florida swamp, and disappeared. His car turned up in the parking lot of the adjoining Picayune Creek Environmental Park. Everyone in the country knew his name. The FBI, Northport Police, and state and local agencies searched that reserve for over a month. Cameras were parked at the entrance. The world was watching. They could not find him. The obvious question is how that is possible with those resources in a park that borders a suburb. The answer is water. It rained for days after he went in, and portions of the Carlton Reserve flooded outright. Searchers described the plain difficulty of moving through a place where whole sections were simply submerged. The swamp did not hide him cleverly. It just put a few feet of water over him and waited. On October 7th, the flooding receded enough that the reserve was hikeable again. On October 20th, 5 weeks in, his remains were found in an area that had until recently been underwater. What was left is the part that stays with you. The autopsy describes skeletal remains scattered on the ground around his backpack, gnawed by animals, recovered in zones, the torso and skull in one, lower vertebrae in another, the bones of an arm in a third. He was identified by dental records because there was not enough of him left to identify any other way. 5 weeks in a park bordering a city with the FBI in the parking lot. Number 2 goes to the swamp that made a nationally hunted man invisible using nothing but rainwater. Number 1, the Everglades. And so we arrive at number 1, and it could not be anything else. Not because the Everglades is the most famous wetland on Earth, but because it is the only one on the list that has swallowed people by the hundred and simply kept them. Return to where we started. May 11, 1996, ValueJet Flight 592, 110 people aboard, goes into the sawgrass northwest of Miami at around 500 miles an hour and roughly a 75-degree angle. It does not crash so much as disintegrate. One of the divers compared it to throwing a glass vase off a 10-story building. There is no wreckage at the impact point. The largest piece of the airplane found in the early days is 8 feet long. Searchers wade into 4 to 6 feet of muck and water laced with jet fuel, snakes, and alligators, using fish nets to lift what they can find. Divers are eventually kept out of the impact crater itself because of the biohazard. The recovery runs a month. Roughly 75% of the plane comes out. Only about 20% of the human remains do. Partial remains of 70 people out of 110 are identified and returned to families. 110 concrete pillars stand off the Tamiami Trail today, pointing 12 miles toward a place that still holds the rest. And it was not the first time. On the night of December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 flew a perfectly good L-1011 into these same Everglades because the crew was preoccupied with a burned-out light bulb. 101 people died. But here the swamp did something almost worse than kill. The water and muck absorbed the impact and softened it, and 75 people lived. The mud packed their wounds and kept them from bleeding out. A frog hunter named Bud Marquis reached them before anyone else and pulled survivors from the wreckage in the dark. And then the swamp turned on the people it had saved. Organisms in that water infected their wounds, and 8 of them had to be treated in hyperbaric chambers for infections that carried the threat of gas gangrene. That is the Everglades. It broke one airplane into pieces too small to identify, and kept 4/5 of the people inside it. It caught another one gently, and then tried to eat the survivors. It is not hostile and it is not merciful. It is simply a system that processes what falls into it, at the pace it has always worked, a few miles from an international airport. Number 1 belongs to the swamp that has taken more people in single afternoons than most wilderness takes in a century, and has never given most of them back. And here is the pattern, because none of this is a series of freak events. Look at what actually recurs. The searches fail for the same reasons every time. A canopy that defeats aircraft, water that erases scent and sight, flat terrain with no landmark to steer by, and a landscape that looks identical in every direction for tens of thousands of acres. The recoveries follow the same arc. Rescue, then recovery, then suspension. And the swallowing is not slow. It is the speed that should frighten you. 5 weeks for a man the entire country was hunting. A single afternoon for 110. These places do not hunt anyone. They just receive what enters them and close over it, the way water closes. So this list was never about fear of the swamp. Fear is loud and it burns off by the parking lot. It is about the arithmetic that Florida built its highways and its subdivisions and its airports at the edge of a system that has been quietly absorbing whatever falls into it since long before any of it had a name. The peat is still floating up near the state line, holding one person's weight and not the next. The water is still standing over the Carlton Reserve every time it rains. And 12 miles north of a memorial on the Tamiami Trail, in a 100-foot crater under the sawgrass, most of 110 people are still exactly where they came to rest. What is known is that the swamp keeps its own council, that the searches end but the swamps do not, and that the flat green water beside every road in this state tells you nothing at all about what is suspended underneath it, patient, unbothered, holding what it has taken, the way it has held things since long before there was anyone here to come looking.